This is the State of the Fan Address. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with PucksandPitchforks.com editor-in-chief Nick Villano, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, or Twitter Live, Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Tonight's title, McLeod, Foote, and the Hockey Canada, What We Know.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're just gonna be real with you tonight because this is the story. This is the story. Me and Sam have never been one to shy away from anything. There's been a lot of hard stories we had to talk about while on this podcast, including this one. We've spent some time already going over this story, but today took a turn, and we're gonna talk about it because I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm a subject matter expert on the topic, but I have covered a lot of this crime. I don't know how much I talk about what used to be my day job, but I was a news journalist for a long time. I was a news producer for a long time, and this comes up. And a lot of the situations that come up, it's very similar to this. So I'm not going to beat around the bush anymore. I'm just going to say, the story of today is that 5 members of that 2018 Hockey Canada team at that charity event, it looks like the reports are that they are going to be arrested for a sexual assault back then. All the players are expected to be on that 2018 Hockey Canada team. And what we know right now is that on Sunday, Dylan Dube of the Calgary Flames was granted a leave of absence. And it kind of went without this is kind of happening every time from time to time with the NHL's, relatively new stance on mental health and things like that. So it didn't really make no news because, you don't want to ask questions about that at the time. But when it made news was yesterday, when Philadelphia Flyers goalie Carter Hart also took a leave of absence. It caused people to connect the dots. It caused people to start asking questions. And that's where I assumed this story was able to break, is that somebody left crumbs out to the story. And now we need to start checking our sources, start building new sources, and seeing where the story leads. And the Globe and Mail was the first to report that 5 players are being told to return to London for what is expected to be an arrest and everything that goes along with that. We don't know who those 5 players are, but 5 players from that 2018 Hockey Canada Juniors team called for leaves of absence today. 2 of those players are on the New Jersey Devils. Michael McLeod and Cal Foote have both at the same time been put under a leave of absence. There was a major charity event last night for the New Jersey Devils, and McLeod and Foote were both not there. Which again, I've always been on this podcast saying you should not connect the dots. You should not go into yourself with the investigation. But I'm also somebody to say there's no such thing as a coincidence. And the second that the Devils put out a statement that looks similar to the one that Philly put out, it was different than the one that Calgary put out, but it was similar to the one that Philly put out. It became clear that this is at least somewhat tied. And I know a lot of Devils fans feel sick today. If you don't know the details of the story, I would say go look at them, but they're heinous. And that's the word I've been using a lot. This story is heinous. And the the details of the actual sexual assault are awful, and it involves, the reports say it involves all 5 players and possibly more. And what's probably not getting enough coverage is the aftermath and the reported intimidation of the victim and all this. And again, all of this is John Doe's and player ones and player twos and hiding behind inconspicuous things. And I do want to be clear that I do believe in innocent until proven guilty. I do believe in that there's a court of law for a reason. So we are not going to get into what I think Michael McLeod's immediate status with the Devils or Cal Foote's immediate status with the Devils should be. But Sam, let's talk about what we know. What I know is that Tom Fitzgerald very strangely, unceremoniously just let Michael McLeod go based on what he was asking in the offseason. And here, I'm sorry, I got to turn this off. This is he unceremoniously let him walk to free agency, and then he came back and accepted a 1-year deal. When his friend, who was a worse player, Nathan Bastian, no offense to Nathan, but McLeod had a very good playoff and then got a 1-year deal, while Bastian, who had some injury issues, got a 2-year deal. And that was very telling. And I don't want to connect the dots that say those two things are connected, but it gave the Devils a very clear out. What's strange is that they signed Cal Foote at all. Now, Cal's brother, Nolan, is with the organization. I'm sure there was some vouching. I'm sure they did their due diligence. And one thing I do want to touch on is, this really ramped up in the summer, right? June is when McLeod was first forced to really answer to this. And I know a lot of people kind of jumped to conclusions because he gave a non-answer. And, maybe that answer was lawyered to death. But, a lot of people are saying there's a reason why that was questioned. And the way he made that statement was questioned. Cal Foote came out pretty aggressively to say he wasn't involved in this. I went back and looked at the statement today. He was pretty precipitous that I have nothing to do with this. So, Carter Hart had a similar statement, so obviously, people are going to lie in these situations to try to save their butts or avoid questioning. But here we are. So we have 5 players under a leave of absence, and the report is 5 players are going to get arrested. I don't know what else you do with that information except for connect the dots. The 5th player is a player who plays in Europe. His name is escaping me right now, but there's no others. There's not a 6th anywhere. There's not a 7th anywhere. There's not nobody else that's been tied to this 2018 team or played on that 2018 World Juniors team has taken any action outside of nothing. Standing by their original denials. So that leads us to today. McLeod and Foote are I would assume. I don't even want to assume. The claim is that these 5 players, whoever they are, when we can assume that they're those 5 players that we named, have to go to London to turn themselves in. What's going to happen next? And now I'm more obviously versed with the American judicial system than the Canadian one. But in the American judicial system, what you'll do is you'll face charges. Usually the next day, you'll spend a night in jail. The next day, the famous ones sometimes get in early. So it might be that day, it might be the next day. You will face a judge. The judge will decide bail and the conditions of bail. That usually includes house arrest. That usually includes price of bail. That sometimes there's no bail given at all if you're considered a flight risk or you're considered a danger to society. I'm going to be honest with you. The fact that this is a lot of these guys or all these guys' first offense, I don't think that they're going to be held. Just my opinion on covering these things is that I don't remember a one-time sexual assault being held in prison because it's just not how judges usually work. But again, the thing about judges is that they're all singular people and they all make their own decisions. But yeah, I mean that's where I'm at so far. I would expect that McLeod and Foote are going to be dealing with this for the foreseeable future. I can't see them doing anything on the Devils while this is going on.
I don't think that's going to
Because
happen. Are they considered a flight risk? I don't know how things work in Canada, but are they a flight risk? Do they have to stay within the country? During
that's another part.
during that. You know what? There is no way, all 5 players would be playing at this time till this is concluded. Again, the presumption of innocence to proven guilty is in play here, but just there's no way Cal Foote and Michael McLeod are going to come back with the team, in a couple weeks. It's just not going to happen. There's no way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, you raise.
Hey, can I preface something real quick, Sam?
What's up?
I do want to say that the most important thing about this is the victim and getting the justice for this victim so this person can heal. But we are going to mention the hockey. We are going to speak about the hockey because that's where we're the subject matter experts. I don't want to get into the court case. We'll probably speak to people in the next couple of weeks. I've been working on trying to get lawyers for this podcast, trying to get people who know how this works a little bit, a lot more than the two of us. But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I did want to say that. We understand what's important here, and we will continue to root for that justice will be served. But I do want to just not ignore the hockey portion of this. I just want everybody to understand that when we talk about the hockey portion of this, we know that's secondary.
That and plus, not to simplify it, but I just want the truth to come out. I think we need to have the truth come out. What exactly happened? It all started with a settlement a couple years ago, and then there was an investigation on that or I don't know how that part, and then finding out that Hockey Canada was using money for the registration fees for settlements, and then from there it one thing.
Well, it was taxpayer dollars too, right? Wasn't there
no? Apparently, no taxpayer dollars from what I read.
Okay. Sorry, it's there's been so many.
Yeah, again, it's been so confusing because you and I are U.S. based. It took me probably because when everything broke this morning, because this whole thing has been going on for so long, I had to review what actually happened. Because, social media there's so much noise, so much distortion, but I just wanted to get the facts. I read a USA Today article, a couple other articles as well, just to kind of rehash what exactly happened. There was a settlement, and I think Rick Westhead on Twitter said that the victim is willing to cooperate with the police, is willing to testify, and is willing to be cross-examined.
Well, just because I read the same thing, I think he's saying he spoke to people not connected to the case about their advice, and he's connecting the dots there that's saying if we came to this in Canada, he believes that to be true. I just want to you're not wrong in what you're saying, but there's just a slight clarification that he didn't talk. He talked to lawyers who have covered sexual assault before, and they said that to get to this point, that is their expectation.
Okay, I apologize.
It was he worded it so confusingly. It took me I had to go into
and that's the problem. And that's the problem with this whole thing. There's a lot of distortion, points of view, but to review the timeline of this, I mean, it's been going on for a while now, and again, when you read the ESPN article, It's the ESPN services, kind of like Associated Press type article on ESPN.com. To see not one but two New Jersey Devils in this. I thought it was just one. I thought it was just Michael McLeod because the rumors in the past year, but to see two, that was a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow. It was like one, but two. Then you have Carter Hart and the rest. That was a lot. Now I thought originally there was 8 people. Is it now down to 5, or how's?
I think they have enough evidence in 5.
Okay.
And so let me just from covering this, let me really quickly just tell you why A, it took this long, B, they closed the investigation and reopened it, and C, why there's this 5-8 discrepancy. The burden of truth on a sexual assault case is probably as high as any case, higher than murder, higher than robbery or whatever, because for the most part, these crimes happen in private, and it quickly becomes a he said, she said. And you ask any prosecutor in any country in the world, he said, she said is not worth going to trial for. These prosecutors live and die on their conviction rates, and their conviction rates. Mm-hmm. They get elected on their conviction rates. They get promoted on their conviction rates. And this is why they drop many cases, because they don't see a burden of proof that's beyond a reasonable doubt. It is also why a lot of these cases will go to civil trial. Just look at Deshaun Watson. Now, not talking about his guilt or innocence, but you had a large subset of women say that he assaulted them, and they did not even pursue a trial. They did not, or the prosecutor's office did not pursue a trial because the burden of proof in a sexual assault case is incredibly large. I'm telling you, I would put my money on it. That's why they closed the case however many years ago. They reopened it because of public pressure. I will tell you, I can almost guarantee it, that they reopened it because of public pressure, because a prosecutor's office very rarely reopens a case without very new evidence. And new evidence would have to be other victims. New evidence would have to be, for this, it's usually just other victims, right? It's usually more people coming forward and this becoming a serial case. That's not the case here. What probably happened is the public pressure forced the police to reevaluate the evidence, probably re-spoke to the witnesses and maybe spoke to a couple more. And then they learned new things in that process, and new evidence came forward in that process. But I do think that the public pressure, because that, I'm just going to be honest, journalism and the public pressure that comes from journalism can change cases. It's forced cases to move cities. It's forced cases to go to mistrial. It has a real effect. And most journalists understand this and will keep that in mind when they're covering the story. And I brought something up to you before the podcast, Sam, that I was looking in the London, Ontario markets. I didn't see a lot of coverage of this, and I was surprised. But again, it's because the burden on journalists is also, you don't want to just throw things out there based on someone else's reporting. So anyway, I just want people to understand that the reason this went from 8 to 5 does not mean that this person's account has changed. It could just mean that, there's reports of videos of, existing. There's reports of message trees to the victim after the assault existing. All of this evidence could tie just these 5 players to it and not the other 3. So burden of proof is why we're here 5 years later, almost 6 years later. Burden of proof is why 5 and not 8 likely, right, is most likely where we're at. And burden of proof is why this investigation was closed and now it's been reopened. So just kind of throwing that out there, because that is something I understand. I understand how court cases work, how charges work, what is the level of scrutiny that a prosecutor is willing to handle, and what is the risk involved for a prosecutor? Because the prosecutor doesn't look at it like, do I think this person is guilty or not? Because that is a 50-50 proposition. He's looking at, they have to be like, I've spoken to prosecutors, some of them like to be 90% sure that they're going to get a guilty verdict. And, that's hard in a sexual assault case.
So that kind of explains to me, because I was trying to wrap my head around it today, because there was a settlement. Normally a settlement is you're done. It's over. There was money involved. This case is because normally there's a criminal conviction and then a civil case. Isn't normally how that goes? But now it's a civil
Not
case.
always.
Yeah. Again, I'm not a lawyer or whatever, but it's just I was trying to wrap my head around it. Like, how did it go from a settlement to criminal? But I see what you mean. It's all about the conviction success rate that a prosecutor looks at it, and if it's a 50-50 chance, it doesn't look good. They're not going to take
a 50-50 chance. They're just not.
Okay.
And that's also and there's I don't think this is a Canada thing. This is a U.S. thing, but that's where grand juries come into effect for that. And that's basically a test jury. Like, this is the evidence we have. Would you convict on this? And a grand jury will say yes or no. And if you ever noticed, a grand jury can recommend charges, and a prosecutor still does not have to charge that person. They usually do, because it's public if they recommend charges. But, that's why you hear about grand juries, and that's the difference between a grand jury. A grand jury is basically just a different type of jury, but they're not going to trial. They're just looking at evidence and making a presumption of guilt or innocence based on that evidence that's right in front of them, without the other side, right? Without the counter argument from a defense attorney.
Okay.
That was just I've seen a lot of things being brought up. I'm trying to address the things that I do know about and that I am understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's I never want to downplay what this means for the victim, and gosh, I hope this helps. Like, I do. Like, first and foremost, I've seen so many of these victims not get the justice that they deserve, and I just hope today is one step towards it, whether that's McLeod, Foote, or someone else. The fact that arrest is happening can still lead to other arrests that the evidence could have pointed to the wrong person. It can happen. A 5-year investigation leading to this, I would be surprised if they had the wrong person. I think we're now looking at kind of like what the evidence says and what the evidence shows. And, I didn't do the research, and I kind of regret it now, of whether this is an open court case or a closed court case, which means, I'm sure you've seen court sketches before. Those are when cameras are not allowed in trials. And there's a certain level of trials that cameras are allowed in, but then others will just be straight up filmed, like the Johnny Depp case, or there's a couple other, there's lots of, the OJ Simpson case was filmed and stuff like that. So
I'm assuming each player has their own counsel and attorney, and
it is Canada law that you have to have your own counsel
okay.
in a case like this.
And
I just learned that today.
Yeah, and so it is possible that one of those players down the road could strike a deal, plea deal, and flip on the other four, or bring more people into it for their.
And I think that's that's going to. I would put all of the money in the world on that is the prosecutor's plan. The prosecutor. I'm going to tell you this right now. Do you know when they say the cover-up was worse than the crime?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't actually mean that the cover-up is worse than the crime. The cover-up is what's going to get you convicted.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this player in this lawsuit or in this police report, in all these documents, that went out of his way to contact the victim, and there was words like intimidation thrown around, and that, I think, would tell you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He did this on the report said he did this in DMs of a social media account that I would assume is tied to this person's name, and through text messages, which is tied to his phone number. So basically just handing over evidence. And, it's a text message is right there. You can't fake a text message. If you show them the text message and you show them what it says, I can't go back and edit what you said in a text message, Sam. You know what I mean? So it's pretty cut and dry there. So this is the type of proof that I think is becoming more out in the open, which is what caused a lot of this. And
it's surprising that it took that long, or why they didn't try it the first time around. Did they have that evidence, the text or potential video, or did they have it?
I don't think we knew what they had, because this story wasn't that big back then. The story got big when the lawsuit turned into a settlement.
Yeah.
And then people started to investigate Hockey Canada, and Hockey Canada has a very seedy history. Mm-hmm. And there are reports that they had a fund for sexual assault to pay people off. That has been denied that any money has ever been spent on that. So take that for what it is. But, there's reports that money has been spent back. I think it's back all the way back to 1979, mm-hmm. and multiple cases since then. I think that it's pretty, this just happened to happen on the same day that Mike Ribeiro is facing sexual assault charges. The former Dallas Stars player, and he played, I think, in Nashville and Colorado and a couple other places.
Yeah.
And he actually had faced a previous sexual assault allegation where he settled with the woman and no charges came from it. Mm-hmm. And that happened while he was still playing, and there are a lot of these cases. It's hard not to go back to hockey culture and this bro code, privileged, I'm just going to be just be out with it. Hockey is a rich white person's sport. And there's a lot of privilege there. I'm not saying that African Americans or, Asians or any other, Latinos can't play the sport, and they do. But by and large, from little tykes, ice mites, all the way to the NHL, there's a privilege involved with playing hockey, and it's because it's very expensive. The equipment is very expensive. Ice time is very expensive. League fees are very expensive. And these guys grow up with each other, and there's a privilege involved with this that I just think we need to, when we address hockey culture, and I think this is going to do it. I think that we're eventually going to have the conversation from top to bottom. It takes this. We talked about, the death of the player in Europe that had us take neck guard seriously, and the fact that you're skating on razor blades. It takes an extreme to get hockey to change, and it always has. And I think we're here. I think this is that extreme. This crime is heinous. The cover-up is heinous. And I think that it's going to take hockey to look in the mirror and say, how did we let it get here? And, I think that that's an important conversation for people way above our pay grade, Sam. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know how to fix hockey culture. It's just pretty clear that it needs fixing. Mm-hmm. I think. Do you think we covered it sufficiently? I don't want to like shortchange it, but I do think we need to talk about the on ice impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that we talked about it because the facts are all over the place on this case, and trying to get the timeline, I mean, I spent the whole day today wrapping my head around it, trying to understand what exactly happened. And I'll go back to what I said, and Ramona said this as well in the YouTube live, that, just tell the truth and get it over with. Like, let's the truth get out, because the more you cover it up, the more it's just let's put it this way. I'm tired of guessing what really happened, and but there will be a day in court, and in front of a judge, and
Maybe there still might not be a day in court.
Yeah,
I just want to point that out, that all of these players could take settlements of different degrees. So this isn't necessarily going to court, even though an arrest is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So and that would be, I don't know how to feel about that, because I've heard in the past that police will push for that, to not force a victim to out herself or himself, but in this case, herself, because that person's going to have to do it, right? This person will no longer be a anonymous victim if this goes to court. And think about the Larry Nassar case and how many women had to come forward. And obviously this is a different situation where it's one victim, but think about how many people had to out themselves as a victim. And I do think in certain cases, police want to avoid that. They do. So they'll try to get this where she gets justice and these players get the punishment they deserve, but at the same time, they protect her identity. So I have seen that often. And that, bad for the public because we don't get the facts, and there will always be defenders, right? Blind defenders who if the evidence is in front of them, they don't care and they'll make excuses. But, that is a situation that could happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, for the New Jersey Devils, seeing that, I guess the practice, they had practice today, I believe. Mm-hmm. And not seeing McLeod's name or Cal Foote, they're going to have to move forward. And, McLeod was a big part of their bottom six. And Cal Foote, with all the injuries, was called up. And I believe Lindy Ruff did say, if I'm not mistaken, Lindy Ruff did say that they're going to call up. They're definitely going to call up. Obviously, Lindy couldn't comment. I don't think the NHL wants the organizations to comment. Is that correct? Are they?
So the NHL has its own investigation going on that's not finished.
Yeah.
That if they come to a conclusion, they're going to suspend the players. So that's still to come, but I don't want to, like, that's another rabbit hole. We've talked about the rabbit holes enough by the criminal case. That's going to come. We'll talk about that. It'll probably come on a Wednesday, so it'll be something we talk about on the podcast. And but you're kind of talking about what I kind of wanted to move to, is that the lineup is going to look different. And, and I'll preface it one more time. It's not the important thing, but it is a thing, is that the lineup is going to look different, right? It's losing McLeod and Foote, for that matter. But let's talk about McLeod. McLeod was your number one PK guy, your number one faceoff man. He was a guy that you were putting in your top 6 with Jack Hughes out. And he's the one guy you bring on. You bring him on in overtime to win faceoffs. He played such an integral role in this lineup. You have Eric Holla, who can play probably like 80% of what McLeod is, as far as winning faceoffs, as far as providing stunning offense, as far as playing well defensively and playing the penalty kill. But you're now, this was an organization that didn't have to worry about the center position because you had 4 young, what was presumably great set of centers, and Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Michael McLeod, and eventually what you would expected to be Dawson Mercer. And if it wasn't Dawson Mercer, it would be a veteran like Holla or, Thomas Nosek, somebody like that, right? You had, not only did you have young centers, but you added veteran depth at the position so you could move Mercer to the wing where he's been a little bit more natural. Now, Sam, you're in this place where you don't. It was very clear before this that goalie and defensemen were like by far the number one thing you had to go after, and if you didn't go after them, like you're gonna have trouble making the playoffs. Now you have to add center to the list, and those are the 3 most expensive pieces to get. And we got good news on Jack Hughes. Not good. We got news on Jack Hughes. I expect him to be back shortly after the All-Star break. There was news from the Tom Fitzgerald press conference, which feels like 3 days ago, does it not? Like it feels like a week ago.
It was yesterday.
It was last night.
Yeah.
Like it was. It feels like so long ago because today's just been so long. But, you expect Jack Hughes back in a couple of weeks, so really just have to get through the tide. But, and you talk about this a lot, about this team doesn't have beef. This team has no physicality. And McLeod, I think, was like second in hits, even if you include the defenseman. Maybe he's third behind Ball and Bastian, but, he brought some physicality to the team that this team desperately needs. And, if he's not there, then you kind of have to replace that with Timo Meier. And Timo Meier's been injury prone. And, like, there's such a snowball effect to this lineup without McLeod that I just think that
wasn't Noshik that security blanket or that safety net? Wasn't he originally?
But he got hurt after 2 games?
Yeah, but originally when they signed him,
yeah. He was supposed to be McLeod insurance, is what they called him.
Yeah,
not the Devils, what the fans called him.
Yeah, so how do you prepare for this? Were the Devils prepared for it? Did they? But. That's why, again, you can't predict these things, but this team has holes in it, such as in the goaltender position, the defense, with all the injuries. When we talk about making a trade in the past 2 months, this is not the time to put the chips all the way in, but you never know. This may bring the team together in some sense in terms of another player stepping up into that role in the face-offs or defensively. That's a hard shoes to fill, but, it should be interesting to see how the Devils react. And with Palat coming back, he's feeling better. Does that help? Like you said, not having McLeod there is a big hole. Cal Foote, he's basically up as an emergency basis because of all the injuries on defense. Will Fitzgerald stand pat and go with what he has right now? Is he going to make a trade, or is he's probably still evaluating what to do? Because the price
I wrote
is so
about this
high.
a couple of weeks ago. And then obviously it's before this whole situation came about, but I wrote that there's a possibility he didn't make a move because he's still trying to consider whether this team is worth making a move for.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about like trading a 3rd-round pick for a depth defenseman or whatever, because there was a couple telling things in that press conference. The one is talking about trades. He was talking to Ryan Novozinski, who's a friend of the podcast, and talked about how he kind of like vaguely mentioned that all the GMs are in, like feeler mode, right? They're trying to see, they're sending out feelers, but they're not sending out offers. They're not sending out trades. They want to know who's available, and they want to know for the things that they have that are available, where are you and your desire for this available asset? And Tom Fitzgerald is calling teams and saying, what do you have available? Is this person available? Is Jacob Chitrin available? Is Jacob Markstrom available? Is John Gibson available? Is Ilya Labushin, whatever, whoever, and he's probably called some big fish. Like, is Yusei Saros available? Is Spencer Knight available? Is Yaroslav Askarov available? Like, probably not Askarov. Askarov is still probably a year away from the NHL, so that's probably not where he's going. But you know what I mean? Like, he's testing the huge names on the market, like Markstrom and Saros and Knight and things like that. But we heard this week that apparently now Markstrom might not even be available. So that takes a goalie off the market. Peter Mrazek just signed with the Chicago Blackhawks for 2 more years, so that takes a name off the market. Not a name that like we really wanted, but I think Mrazek's a good veteran and could have gotten us through the season. The Minnesota Wild are not committed to trading Marc-Andre Fleury. They really like having him on the team, and they still think that they can make a run to the playoffs. And now you have another team in the race, Sam. Philadelphia is going to be in the goaltending race. And this 2 days ago, they said that John Tortorella said he wasn't sure he was going to make a trade. And, I'm going to be honest. I know Danny Briere spoke today. I only wanted to see if he said something on Carter Hart. He didn't really. I know he spoke about the trade deadline. I didn't really. I think the general consensus is probably like we're not going to make a trade just to make a trade because we're in it right now. But I think the Devils just really have to you have to evaluate everything here because I think that the McLeod thing impacts everything. I think it impacts everything. I think it impacts whether they're going to make a trade or not, what they're now going to target, who they're going to target, what it's going to impact the Dawson Mercer contract. It's going to impact Sam. I think it's going to impact what they do with Lindy Ruff. Like if they were on the fence about Ruff, why would a coach like Jay Woodcroft, let's say, why would Jay Woodcroft come to the Devils? Like what would possess him to do that right now? When you're coming to, I understand that there's talent here, but you're coming to a mess. And it's not a mess because of Lindy Ruff. Like I thought the Devils were a mess because of John Hines when he got fired. Lindy Ruff didn't cause this mess. Do I agree with every decision he's made? No. But the mess is defensive injuries, Jack Hughes injury, young players up and down the lineup, and now this. And this is the straw that broke the camel's back to get one of those big name coaches to come and coach the Devils. So I think that's going to impact that. I think that Lindy Ruff is going to get
signed a multi-year deal. Do you think they were really considering canning him?
So according to Elliot Friedman, it was a 1-year deal with an option.
Okay.
So I don't know what the option was. I don't think they reported. If it was a Lindy option, then it's a 2-year deal. They don't care about paying an extra year of Lindy Ruff's contract. So it's not, and I think that's why it took so long. I think that's why it took until, what did he sign, in September or early October? I think that's why it took Lindy Ruff so long to get that contract, because I think Fitzgerald he wanted to see it for 1 more year. And again, I don't agree with everything Ruff's done, but this season's not Lindy Ruff's fault. I'm more upset with Ryan McGill's performance. He just hasn't gotten this defense to play well, and most of this Devils team's problems is because of poor defensive play and the goaltending's reaction to that. So the fact that there's always two players underneath the blue line on goals, it seems like, is a scheme problem. It's like unless you got Forrest Gumps out there that are just not listening to you telling them to stop doing that. You're telling them to do that because when we talked about this the past 2 years under Lindy Ruff, you prioritize possession, and his assistants will do what they can to take that narrative and make it work. I think that Ryan McGill has put together a system that prioritizes possession, but without the kinds of players that could get it. That's where you miss Ryan Graves and Damon Severson. Is Damon Severson and Ryan Graves going board battles? They're both playing terribly in their new teams, so it's not like you miss what they're doing this year, but you miss what they did in this system and how they work. They were not worth the contracts that they got to the Devils, but turning Damon Severson and Ryan Graves into Luke Hughes and Colin Miller / Simone Nemetz is a downgrade when it comes to in the defensive zone. So that's all to say that there's missing McLeod, and to a much smaller extent Foote, is going to impact just about every decision the Devils are going to make from now until the end of the season. And it could just have Tom Fitzgerald look at this team and say, we're going to let the injured guys come back and then just see what happens. I'm not going to use this LTIR money. I don't think, again, if I were to predict, if you were going to sit here and ask me what do I think they're going to do, I think they're going to make a trade. But it is on the table now with every bad thing that's happened to this team and with Tom Fitzgerald now with this brand new contract that he can just say, if we get another high draft pick, that's great. I'd rather make the playoffs and try to go on a Florida Panthers type run, but I'd rather just see this out. If there's a deal that's too good to be true that falls into my lap at the trade deadline, which probably will happen, there's going to be a guy you can get for a third-round pick, like the Pat Maroon deal a couple of years ago where they got him for a third-round pick. Something like that will come up. I'll make a small move. In this scenario, I still think he's hunting for a big fish. But if, say, Jacob Markstrom has come off the table, and we just talked about Mrazek's now off the table, if the only fish in the sea is John Gibson or I don't even know like another name, maybe like Philip Grubauer, like you don't want, like players you either don't want are huge risks for high prices or just not worth it.
Which is why they're still going with Vitek Vanacek.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the salary cap number is reasonable. All right, somehow he's getting the wins. He's on a two-game
I do want to ask
right
you
now.
about that. Can we talk about that real quick? We have like 10 minutes left, so can we talk hockey just for 10 minutes?
Oh yeah.
Let's. So I'm comparing this, and tell me if I'm off base here. Do you remember that Corey Schneider, Martin Brodeur year?
Yes, very well.
This feels very similar to that, in that Brodeur just didn't play well that year. He had probably his worst season as a pro. But he was winning a ton of games. And the Devils were winning 5-4, 6-3, 6-4 when Marty was in net, and then losing 2-1 when Corey Schneider was in net. And Corey Schneider's record, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was terrible, but his numbers were amazing. I attributed it to the way the team played in front of him. I got to give Marty some credit because he was still mobile. He was still a third defenseman at that point in his career. He was still playing the puck very well. So I do think, in a way, he drove offense. But I don't think you can say that about Vitek Vanacek. But it's reminding me about like how the Devils play in front of him offensively. It's almost like they know they have to be aggressive because Vitek Vanacek's going to allow 3, 4, 5, 6 goals. And they know they're going to need to score 3, 4, 5, 6 goals to win the game. But with Dawes, it's almost like Dawes is also getting the short end of the stick where he keeps playing the second half of a back-to-back. I don't know what that's all about. So,
well, I can tell you, players don't think like that, Nick. They don't.
okay.
They don't go out there and say, "Oh crap, we better put up 5 goals because Vitek's in." I don't believe that for a second. I think a lot. again, but it's like a phenomenon in sports. Like you remember in baseball when Jacob deGrom had like what a .32 ERA, and it wasn't getting the run support. That there was some stat that if he got 3 runs or more in all of his games, he would have like over 35 wins, but instead he only had 10. For whatever reason, it's mind-boggling sometimes when, I remember that 2014 year. Brodeur wasn't that bad. He just wasn't Brodeur-esque, so to speak. And I think Brodeur had trouble that year getting into a rhythm because he was splitting time with Schneider because Brodeur was normally used to the 70, 75 game workload. That's what he was used to, right? So, but I just find it strange that, VTech, to his credit, and I supported him a couple weeks ago in a tweet because I really think he's going to turn it around. That VTech in that game against the Golden Knights was able to shake off whatever, the funk, and was able to be good enough to get that team the win. Just in the end there. Because, again, he let up some softies, which he needs to clean up. But, again, the Devils, they're not good defensively. So either learn how to play defense or they may have to do the fun and gun offense and just try to outscore their opponents, which you and I both know is not the way to win the cup, and it's unsustainable long term.
It is unsustainable long term, but do you think short term it can get them back into this race or get them solidified in this race? Because this team is, especially now, with what we know today, and now we know there's another major piece that's going to be missing for the rest of the season, I would assume. Do you think that there's a reason to go to that running gun system, say for the month of February, just to try to track meet the rest of the teams they play, tire them out, see if they can steal games in the third period, and play almost like a Chip Kelly offense, where you're just going for it, but then you kind of like peel back on that a little bit. So right now the Devils they're 2 points out of a playoff spot, but they have 2 games in hand of the Detroit Red Wings. They're four points back of the Carolina Hurricanes, 5 points back of the Philadelphia Flyers with 3 games at hand. So they're not out of this, but you're starting to be down too many people. And you're starting to lose too many players at key positions. Like, this team really does need Hughes. And saying this running gun system would have to have Hughes because he's the fastest and most dynamic player you have. The problem is that with him having the puck so much, he could fall more. And that's an injury risk for him lately for some reason. But you have Luke Hughes, who has been a running gun player. Shimon Nemitz has been a running gun player. John Marino has been kind of a running gun player, which is weird. Marino, I don't think Marino is the same player. Like, he body swapped with somebody because he's aggressive on offense and just not great defensively this year. And that's like the opposite of what he was last year. And is also not what you need out of him.
Well, I
this
think
year.
it's a team effort why the defense hasn't been that good this year.
Yeah, it's not all Marino, but
yeah.
But Marino and Siegenthaler's fall from grace is a very large part of why the defense is just not good, because they were pillars on the defensive side of things that of why you can build a Hamilton, Nemitz, Hughes trio on that. Having those offensive defensemen there. You could do that because you had Siegenthaler and Marino to play that the exact opposite, like the yin to their yang.
Well,
But
it's let's put it this way: when they get Jack Hughes back, they're going to have two players that are great in zone entries, Bratt and Hughes. That's and they should play on separate lines. I think the Bratt, Timo Meyer, and Nico Hischier line needs some time. I call them the Euro Express, and the Jack Hughes. Let's say Hughes. Are they really putting Palat in the top 6? Yeah, they are, aren't they? Mm-hmm. But when Jack Hughes comes back, with Dawson Mercer and Toffoli, I think that would be a nice line as well.
What did you say? You said Mercer. You said Mercer, Toffoli, and Palat.
No, Hughes.
Hughes. Oh yeah. That makes sense.
Because I think Palat would be best on the third line. And was it Holla, Palat, and Bastian? Is he? Yeah, he's on the. So I guess Tierney's going to get a lot of playing time
until Nosek comes back.
Yeah.
We have some breaking news, Sam.
What's that?
Zach Parise chose his next team.
Which team is that?
He's going to the Colorado Avalanche.
Interesting.
Colorado. According to is that Michael Russo?
Yeah. Yep.
Out of Michael Russo on the Talking North Pod. Yeah, this is Steven Rosner's tweeting about it, who's an Islanders reporter.
Well, he wants to win a cup, So
he doesn't have one, right?
No, he does not.
No, because he went to
Yeah, no, he does not.
I mean, he was decent last year. I thought they should have signed him, but I don't think he's coming back here. I don't think he wants to come back here.
It was sad that he left. It was sad. That was like the beginning of the downfall, if you remember. Took 4 days took 4 days to make a decision, and by the time he made a decision, that everyone was signed at that point.
Yeah, because it was the next year where the Devils got lucky the next year because Kovalchuk retired, and Jágr was still out there. Jágr was still a pretty good player, and that's when Jágr signed with the Devils. But yeah, that year they, and you forget. This is the thing, Sam. Everybody talks about that run that the Chicago Blackhawks went on in 2013 after the lockout. The Devils didn't lose in regulation for like 11 games, and looked like they were still this superstar team that could make a cup run. And then Brodeur tore his bicep, and Johan Hedberg turtled, looked like late era Corey Schneider. I could not make a save, and they had nobody else. I think is that the year that Wedgwood came in and tried to save the season.
That's 2009.
What injury did Brodeur have in 2013?
I don't remember that. I think the torn bicep.
He suffered a major injury, missed 2 months, and it tanked the season. I thought it was a torn bicep, but maybe I'm getting my years mixed up.
I think you got everything mixed up. Because
I definitely know that Hedberg turtled in 2013 when Brodeur got hurt.
Yeah, I think the bicep injury was another time.
Okay. Yeah. It might have been a different injury, but he missed like 2 months. And anyway, but yeah, so and that was the end, right? When Parise was the beginning of the end, Kovalchuk kind of like put the nail in the coffin. We had some fun times with first line Zajac and Jaromir Jágr playing well, and Adam Henrique played well, and then during that era is where you got Paul Murray for the first time.
If you go back to the old footage, because I remember the outdoor game in 2014, that team was slow. compared to what we have right now. They were slow. I mean, they were like molasses, that team. And but what the Devils have right now, they have a lot of speed. They've got a lot of talent. I mean, I know a lot of Devils fans are doom and gloom. I just don't see it. Even with McLeod and Foote out, I think there's just another set of challenges. But once Jack Hughes comes back, I think things are just going to be fine. I don't think they're going to be winning the division, but I do believe that they're going to get that last spot for the playoffs in the last week, of the season. So, and once you get in the playoffs, Nick, the season resets at that point. It totally resets. But they need to. You
saw with the Panthers last year.
Yeah,
I think this team can be the Panthers.
Yep.
I just did some research real quick. It was a back injury, so you were right. 2009 was the biceps injury. 2013 was the back injury. I'm trying to see how much time he missed.
Yeah, Max is telling me in 2013 it was a pinched nerve in neck and upper back.
Okay, so he missed about a month.
Because the one with a ripped bicep, I think Wedgwood and Kevin Weeks, it was a tandem of, I think, 3 goalies.
Mm-hmm.
Not Wedgwood, Clemenson.
I was like, I can't remember his name. It wasn't Wedgwood. That's too long ago.
Yep.
Yeah, so he hurt his back, was out for a month, came back, and just wasn't the same guy. He lost, at one point, 10 games in a row. So clearly, they rushed him back because what's-his-name was not playing well. Anyway, we're already over time. This podcast has been what it was.
Nick, I sent you a text.
Plug?
Yeah, I sent you a text, though.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, yep. Why don't you plug?
So for anybody who wants the facts of the case with Michael McLeod and Cal Foote, pucksandpitchforks.com. I just put everything I went through it with a fine-tooth comb. I gave you sources of where I got the information as much as I possibly could. I wanted to be fair to everything in the situation with also playing this with, the situation I could. Also, I was so, my boss trusts me to put things out there, but I still sent this to him and said, hey, I need you to edit this. So go if you want to learn the facts from a Devil's perspective, it's on Pucks and Pitchforks right now. Also talks about the Tom Fitzgerald press conference from last night, 5 things we learned. The Devils had a surprising prospect, not named Arseny Gritsik, named as a top 10 KHL youngster for December. And we wrote about the injury update that we got from Jack Hughes earlier this week. I wrote about the back-to-backs. I know you really like that article on the back-to-backs. I wrote about them and whether the Devils can win one more back-to-back for the rest of the season and still make the playoffs and what that would take. Jersey Joe wrote about Tom Fitzgerald and the trying to get a physical player in trades. Jonathan Bailey wrote how far is too far as far as how far gone is the season. So that was a really good article. And then Nick Natal, we didn't even talk about this, which stinks, but the Ring of Honor ceremony for Sergei Brylin and kind of who could be next. So you can do your plugs.
Yeah, I'm going to do my plug. If you didn't know, we're having an outdoor tailgate at the outdoor game on February 17th at pucksandpitchforks.com. Let's Go Devils podcast. Partnered up with American Whiskey. We're bringing the big stage out in the MetLife Stadium parking lot February 17th. For more information, go to joinourcrew.com. Joinourcrew.com. Sign up to the website. It's our way to communicate with you because on the day of the game, the outdoor game, we don't know where we're going to be till we get there. And then as soon as we know and as soon as we find out, there'll be a text message and email blast to you so you can find us. because it's going to be a great event. We're bringing the big stage. We're going to have live podcasts, guests, all the hoopla in the parking lot. Paul Marino, yes, John Marino's dad will be there. He's going to be throwing footballs to Devils fans. I'll even do a football call as you catch the football. Also, Max, thank you for the super chat. The jersey release is tomorrow, so which that means is that we may have a morning woo tomorrow morning, live, before I go to work tomorrow, because it's been requested by the fans that a little positive energy for tomorrow. But remember, go to joinourcrew.com, sign up. We will have more information as we know, but we are partnering up with American Whiskey for that big day. And also, we're bringing the And Crew Brew beer to the parking lot, the light red lager. And please sign up. And that's it, Nick. That's all I have.
You know, and as sad as today's podcast was, that's going to be such a fun day. And, you know, as tough as, you know, this season's been tough. Let's go have some fun. Let's go, you know, enjoy each other's company. Some And Crew Brew. I'm excited. I'm excited to finally. I assume I'm not going to be able to try it before then, just because it's impossible to get out of the bunker in South Jersey. With the baby.
I'll try to save you some cans. Actually, Departed Souls has already done a rebrew, so there's already. You know, we went through 450 gallons of And Crew Brew so quickly that they did it. They did canning a couple days ago. All that kind of stuff. So we make sure that you know, we'll have a supply there, is what Ted says, where we make winning memories together, one crew at a time. That's our slogan. And also Paul Marino will be giving out pocket cookies as well.
Ooh.
Yeah. Do you know what that is? Do you know what that is?
What is that?
All right. Because I know we're in overtime. I'll tell the story quickly. So Paul Marino would get us cookies back in last season during the playoffs, and he would stuff the cookies in his pockets, and they'd take them out and give it to you. We're like, oh, okay. Well, you know, after, you know, when the Devils were losing to the Golden Knights, you know, I texted Paul in the first intermission, get us pocket cookies. He's like, sure. And then when we got the pocket cookies after in the second intermission, the Devils were down. And as soon as we ate the cookies, they were nice and warm, the Devils won. Pocket cookies by Paul Marino.
Love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, trying to hit the button here, Nick. Trying to find it. My studio is all messed up right now. Oh, here it is. All right. Well, I want to thank all those tuning in to this podcast, dropping the podcast. In about 20 minutes, there's going to be a morning woo tomorrow. Be there, be square. That's right. And go to pucksandpitchforks.com for all your Devils blog needs. Till next time, let's go Devils.